Have you ever stopped to wonder what it really takes for a genuinely good person, someone kind, compassionate, and ethical, to turn cruel, or even transform into someone we'd call a monster? Imagine someone you look up to, someone you trust, suddenly changing into a person you barely recognize. It sounds like a twisted movie plot. But what if I told you this kind of transformation isn't some weird anomaly? It's actually a pattern we've seen again and again in human history, a pattern woven deep into our psychology and behavior. Today, we're going to dig deep into one of the most disturbing and fascinating questions about human nature. Why do good people sometimes do really bad things? By the end of this video, you'll see the surprising forces that can push totally ordinary people down a dark path. And more importantly, you'll learn how to spot and resist those forces in your own life. Stick around, because the last insight might just be the most powerful and the most empowering of them all. We're going to dive deep into psychological experiments, historical events, and even some philosophical ideas that reveal just how thin the line is between good and evil. And here's the twist. This isn't just a story about other people. It's a mirror. It forces us to ask ourselves, what would I do in their place? Could I be swayed by the same forces? Stay with me, because what we uncover today might change the way you see the world and yourself forever. Let's talk about something called the Lucifer effect, a concept made famous by psychologist Philip Zimbardo. You might recognize him from the Stanford prison experiment, one of the most controversial and chilling studies in psychology. Zimbardo showed that the environment we live in, the roles we take on, and the authority figures we obey can twist even the most good-hearted people into doing harm. Think about that for a second. History is packed with examples of regular people committing horrific acts. The guards at Nazi concentration camps, soldiers who carried out ethnic cleansing, even bystanders who said nothing while atrocities happened right in front of them. Most of these people weren't born evil. They were ordinary human beings caught up in circumstances that brought out the absolute worst in human nature. So, what actually happens? Why does this transformation occur? It turns out it's a combination of social and psychological forces that shape our behavior, and often without us even noticing. One of the biggest forces is the power of authority. Back in the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram ran an experiment that still shocks people today. He wanted to know how far people would go when told to hurt someone, just because an authority figure said so. In Milgram's experiment, volunteers were instructed to deliver electric shocks to another person, who was actually an actor faking pain. But the volunteers didn't know that. And shockingly, most of them kept delivering higher and higher shocks, even when they thought they were seriously hurting someone, all because an authority figure told them it was necessary. It's a scary thought, right? But let's be honest, how many times do we follow instructions without really questioning them? Whether it's from a boss, a teacher, or even social norms, we do this all the time. So, what would you do if someone in a position of power asked you to go against your morals? Just this once, for the greater good. Another huge factor is dehumanization. When we strip away someone's humanity, when we call them names, label them the enemy, or see them as somehow less than us, it becomes way easier to justify cruelty. Propaganda, war, social conflicts, this tactic shows up everywhere. It's a lot simpler to harm another person if you stop seeing them as a person at all. Look at how we talk about groups of people in the news, on social media, or in politics. How often do you hear entire groups reduced to stereotypes or hateful labels? That kind of language shrinks our empathy, disconnects us from each other, and builds that toxic us versus them mentality. But dehumanization isn't the whole story. Group dynamics and social roles also play a massive part. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment shows this perfectly. In that study, college students were randomly assigned to play either guards or prisoners in a fake prison setting. Within days, the guards, who were just regular students, started acting abusive and cruel. The prisoners became stressed, anxious, and submissive. What was really shocking was how quickly they all lost sight of their own identities and just slipped into these roles, almost like they were on autopilot. That raises a huge question for us. How much of who we are is truly our own choice? How much is shaped by the roles we're given, by society, by workplaces, by communities? Are we really free to act as individuals? Or are we just acting out scripts that have been handed to us? Authority, dehumanization, group roles. These aren't just old research topics. They're at work in our everyday lives right now. They influence how we think, how we treat others, even how we see ourselves. We see them in our jobs, our schools, our social circles, our families, and yes, on social media too. And recognizing these forces is the very first step to resisting them. But here's the real kicker. What about that tipping point? The exact moment when a good person crosses that moral line. That moment is usually subtle. It starts with tiny compromises, deciding to stay silent when you see something wrong, going along with a shady decision because it feels safer, telling yourself, "I'll just do it this once." Those little choices pile up, and before you know it, you're on a slippery slope that can lead to really big moral failures. So pause for a second. Think about your own life. Have you ever made a choice that went against your values just because it was easier or felt safer at the time? What happened afterward? As we go further, we're going to break down how to recognize those subtle moments before they spiral out of control. And more importantly, we'll see how to build up the resilience to push back against these psychological traps. But first, there's a deeper question we have to face. Are some people truly immune to the Lucifer effect? As uncomfortable as it sounds, the answer is no. None of us are completely immune. Sure, some personality traits like empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage can help protect us, but under the right, or really the wrong circumstances, anyone can get pulled into these destructive forces. Think of it like this. We all have the potential for great good, but also for incredible harm. That's a recurring theme in philosophy, religion, even literature. Carl Jung, a famous Swiss psychiatrist, called this our shadow, the darker side of ourselves, the parts we'd rather deny or hide away. Jung believed that to really understand ourselves, we have to face this shadow and bring it into the light. Ever felt a flash of anger so strong it shocked you? Or maybe a spike of jealousy or cruelty you didn't know you had in you? That's the shadow peeking through. If we ignore it, that shadow can grow. And if the wrong circumstances line up, it can push us into exactly the kind of harm described by the Lucifer effect. But here's the hope. Awareness is our best defense. By learning how these forces work, we can fight back against them. Next up, we'll go even deeper. we'll break down how these mechanisms show up in the real world and exactly how to counteract them in your own life. Let's pick up where we left off. How exactly do these psychological forces show up in our day-to-day lives, and how can we fight back? One of the most sneaky mechanisms at play is something psychologists call moral disengagement. Albert Bandura, a well-known psychologist, explained that moral disengagement is basically the mental gymnastics we do to justify harmful behavior so we don't feel guilty about it. Like, think about someone cheating on a test. They might tell themselves, "Everyone else is doing it," or "I'll just do it this once because I really need the grade." That way, they don't have to sit with the guilt. Or picture a manager who treats their employees unfairly but tells themselves, "It's for the greater good of the company." These little rationalizations help people keep their self-image intact even when their actions completely go against their values. The more we tell ourselves these excuses, the more distance we create between our choices and their consequences. It's like building a wall between who we think we are and what we're actually doing. This is where something called moral vigilance comes in. Think of moral vigilance like a mental alarm system. It's about regularly asking yourself, am I justifying something that deep down I know is wrong? Even if it feels uncomfortable, asking those tough questions is what helps you stay anchored to your values. Another powerful antidote to moral disengagement is empathy. Empathy is basically the opposite of dehumanization. When you really see someone, their hopes, fears, dreams, struggles, it becomes a whole lot harder to harm them. This is why storytelling, art, and genuine human connection are so important. They remind us of our shared humanity and help break down the walls that divide us. So the next time you catch yourself reducing someone to a label or stereotype, pause and ask, who is this person, really? What do they care about? That simple act of curiosity can reignite empathy and stop the cycle of dehumanization. But let's zoom out for a second, beyond the individual. How do we deal with larger systems or environments that practically invite moral collapse? This is where leadership and collective responsibility become huge. Throughout history, powerful and charismatic leaders have shown us that influence can go in two very different directions. Think about Adolf Hitler, who used fear, anger, and prejudice to justify unspeakable atrocities. On the other hand, leaders like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to encourage compassion, justice, and nonviolent resistance. So it's not just about the leaders we choose to follow. It's about the kind of influence we have on the people around us. Even if you're not the president or a CEO, you still have influence in your family, in your friend group, at school, at work. Ask yourself, how am I using that influence? Am I encouraging fairness and compassion, or am I helping to spread negativity and division? It's a question worth reflecting on. And speaking of reflection, let's dig a little deeper into how the battle between good and evil isn't just something out there. It's happening inside us every single day. But here's the empowering truth. The same circumstances that can push people toward darkness can also help create heroes. So how do you make sure you stay on the path of good? One huge piece of the puzzle is moral courage. Moral courage is the ability to act ethically, to stand up for what's right, even if it costs you something. That might mean risking your job, losing social status, or facing criticism. Think about Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on a bus, or whistleblowers who expose corruption despite knowing they might lose their careers. These people weren't fearless, They acted despite their fear. That's moral courage. And the good news is, moral courage isn't something you either have or don't have. You can build it, like a muscle. Start by figuring out what your core values are. What do you stand for no matter what? Is it honesty, compassion, fairness, accountability? Then, think back to moments in your life when you faced a moral dilemma. Did you act in line with those values, or did you compromise them? Why? One practical way to train your moral courage is to play out what-if scenarios in your mind. Like, what would you do if you saw someone being bullied at work? How would you respond if a manager told you to do something shady? When you visualize these situations and rehearse your response, you're way more prepared to act when the moment actually comes. Another really important piece is to surround yourself with people who share your values. Strong social connections are a huge protective factor. If you have a circle of people who support you, encourage you, and hold you accountable, you're way less likely to cave under pressure. These relationships act like a buffer, making it easier to resist toxic group dynamics or harmful authority.
But what happens when you're stuck in an environment that seems designed to chip away at your values? That's where situational awareness comes in. Situational awareness is basically paying close attention to what's going on around you. What are the group norms? What's considered normal or expected in your environment? If you notice a pattern of cruelty or exclusion, ask yourself, is this really okay, or am I just going along with it because everyone else is? Sometimes even small acts of resistance can make a huge difference. That's the ripple effect. One person's decision to act with integrity can inspire others to do the same. For example, speaking up about a harmful joke at work might seem awkward, but it could give someone else the courage to speak up next time too. Choosing kindness and understanding in your day-to-day interactions can be another subtle but powerful challenge to the culture of dehumanization that surrounds us. Another tool for staying on track is self-reflection. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living," and he was onto something. By taking the time to examine your choices, your biases, and your motivations, you grow. You don't have to aim for perfection. That's impossible. But you can aim to get a little better, a little more intentional every day. Make it a habit to ask yourself questions like, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat people with respect and empathy? Were there moments when I stayed silent, even though I should have spoken up? Over time, these reflections train you to act with more integrity and less impulsiveness.
And then there's the big question. Can the Lucifer effect ever be completely neutralized? Honestly, it depends. Some people will always be more vulnerable than others, and society is never perfect. But the key lies in something psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls the heroic imagination. The heroic imagination is about seeing yourself as capable of extraordinary moral action. It's about believing that heroism isn't just for the people we read about in history books, it's for all of us. And you can nurture that mindset through small, everyday acts of heroism. It could be defending someone who's being treated unfairly, volunteering, or even just choosing patience and compassion over indifference. And studying the stories of real heroes, people from history, or even everyday change-makers, can remind you that courage is within your reach. Stick around, because in the next section, we'll dig even deeper. We'll look at how to apply all these ideas in real, practical ways so you can build a life that resists the pull of darkness and shines a light on the world around you.
All right, let's wrap this up by getting super practical. You've learned about how authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and group dynamics can pull even good people into darkness. And you've seen how awareness, empathy, courage, and self-reflection can help push back. but what can you actually do starting today to become not just resilient, but a positive force in the world around you? First, remember this. You have influence, even if you think you don't. It might not feel like it sometimes, but your words, your choices, and your behavior all shape the world around you, whether that's at school, at work, in your family, or online. In every single interaction, you're contributing to a shared culture. So ask yourself, am I helping build a culture of kindness, fairness, and accountability? Or am I staying silent and letting harmful behavior slide? Let me give you a real-world example. Think of Oskar Schindler during World War II. At first, he was just a businessman trying to make a profit. Nothing heroic about that. But as he witnessed the horror of the Holocaust, he used his resources to save more than 1,000 Jewish people from certain death. His story proves that one person, even in the middle of a horrific system, can make a huge difference. You don't need a war zone to follow that example. You can start right where you are. Speak up when you see injustice. Stand up for someone who's being treated unfairly. Push back against stereotypes or gossip that divide people.
These might feel like small things, but remember the ripple effect. Your actions inspire others, and together that can change entire communities. Next, let's talk about educating yourself and others. One of the best ways to fight manipulation and moral collapse is knowledge. Study history, psychology, philosophy, anything that helps you understand why people do what they do. And don't just keep that knowledge to yourself, share it. Have honest conversations with friends and family, not to shame them or preach at them, but to spark thoughtful dialogue. When we talk openly about the mistakes of the past, we're way less likely to repeat them. Also, think about how the stories you consume shape your beliefs. Movies, books, even memes on social media. They all affect how we see right and wrong, good and evil. Try to challenge yourself by seeking out stories that go beyond stereotypes. Stories that make you see the complexity of people, the shades of gray, rather than just black and white heroes and villains. That helps build empathy and critical thinking. Now, let's address something that's incredibly important: resilience. Acting on your values takes guts, and there will be moments when it feels risky or even painful. Maybe you'll get backlash, lose social support, or feel isolated. That's why building resilience matters so much.
And resilience doesn't mean you're fearless. It means you keep going, even when you are afraid. So how do you build that strength? Practice mindfulness. Journal your thoughts so you can process challenges in a healthy way. Surround yourself with supportive friends and mentors. It's a lot easier to stand tall if you're not trying to do it alone. Community is everything. And here's a big question. What happens if you fail? Because let's be real, you will fail sometimes. We all do. There will be moments when you choose silence instead of courage, or when you act in ways you later regret. That's where self-forgiveness becomes powerful. Self-forgiveness isn't about letting yourself off the hook or pretending you didn't mess up. It's about acknowledging your mistake, owning it, learning from it, and moving forward. If you don't forgive yourself, you risk getting stuck in shame, and shame is paralyzing. It keeps you from growing. But if you can face your failures with honesty and compassion, they can actually make you stronger.
So take a second and think, is there a moment from your past where you fell short of your values? How did you deal with it? Did you grow, or did you let it define you? Reflecting on those moments can be one of the most important steps in building moral resilience. And finally, let's circle back to the most powerful insight of all, the profound interconnectedness of humanity. There's a famous quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn that goes, "The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." What that really means is that the struggle between good and evil isn't about us versus them. It's not about good people versus bad people. It's a struggle inside each of us. That realization can be kind of uncomfortable, but also incredibly hopeful. Because if the potential for harm lives in everyone, so does the potential for healing, compassion, and courage. And that means every choice you make, every moment, is a chance to lean into goodness instead of cruelty. When you understand that, you can approach others with more empathy and less judgment. You'll see their humanity, even if you don't agree with them, and even if they've made mistakes. That doesn't mean excusing terrible actions. Accountability is still crucial, but it does mean understanding that people can change, that people can learn, and that you can help support that transformation, starting with yourself.
So let's bring this home with one final challenge. What kind of world do you want to help build? A world that divides people, labels them, tears them down? Or a world that encourages understanding, fairness, and courage? Every single action you take, no matter how small, contributes to one or the other. Imagine what would happen if each of us decided to act with integrity, to resist those dark psychological forces, and to look for ways to uplift others instead of tearing them down. That's not just some fairy tale dream, it's a reality you can start building today. Maybe it's speaking up for a classmate who's being bullied. Maybe it's calling out an unfair practice at work. Maybe it's just listening, truly listening, to someone whose perspective is different from yours. Those actions matter. They matter a lot. So as you go forward from this video, remember, the battle between good and evil isn't being fought on distant battlefields or in history books alone. It's happening inside you, every single day, with every single choice you make. You have the power to choose. You have the power to resist. You have the power to be a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The question is, will you rise to that challenge? If this video made you reflect, or if it opened your eyes in some way, let me know down in the comments. Share your thoughts, your questions, your own stories of moral courage. I'd love to keep this conversation going. And if you found this helpful, consider giving it a like and subscribing. There's so much more to explore about human psychology, history, and philosophy, and I'd love to take that journey with you. Until next time, remember, you have more power than you think. Use it wisely.